Welcome to the History Unplugged podcast, the unscripted show that celebrates unsung heroes, myth-busts historical lies, and rediscovers the forgotten stories that changed our world. I'm your host, Scott Rank.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of where Scott and I talk about movies, historical movies that we love and we hate. Today we have a real gem, The Scarlet Letter from 1995, starring Demi Moore as Hester Prynne, and Gary Oldman as Reverend Arthur Dimmsdale, Robert Duvall as Roger Prynne, and a cast of others who were well known, at least in their time in the 80s and their 90s. This movie is available for rent on most of your streaming services. Even if you want a few laughs, there's several very good clips of it on YouTube if you don't want to completely torture yourself for 90 minutes. Now, just a very brief, well, Scott, before we even get started, you watched the movie. What was your overall take of it? Because you're going to have to defend this movie.
Yeah, this is going to be some really creative interpretation for me to say how it's awesome. Wow. I'm kind of torn. Before this episode, we talked about John Wayne as Genghis Khan. Is Demi Moore worse casting as a Puritan who's, struggling with trying to remain an upright life in Puritan New England? Is she a worse casted person as Hester Prynne? What do you think?
That's probably one of the most difficult questions I've been asked in a long time. John Wayne as Genghis Khan was just extraordinarily bad, and I would say that she very much gives him a run for his money, because Demi Moore as Hester Prynne is really bad casting. People should be fired, careers ruined over that one.
Yeah, it's a classic thing of a terrible English accent. It's sort of like Keanu Reeves and Bram Stoker's Dracula, just horrible. I'm trying to think of this movie's for. I mean, for an 11-year-old who's hoping for Demi Moore body shots in 1995, or like a pubescent boy, which is probably a demographic for this movie, you're probably watching the edited made-for-TV version, so it doesn't work in that sense. The sensual shots we see at first are of Gary Oldman. So I guess that's progressive gender politics for whatever it's worth. Yeah. And it's a waste. I mean, you have Gary Oldman, who's awesome. But I think of him as Chief Commissioner Gordon, not this, sensual firebrand, but this is the 90s. Robert Duvall's in it. So it had a lot going for it. I don't know. I guess I'll talk about the positive later, where it's kind of like The Conqueror with John Wayne's Genghis Khan. I see ways where it theoretically could have worked and didn't work. And I have some compliments on some very, very tertiary elements of this movie where it could have been worse, but it wasn't worse. So that's where I'm going to go for it. Let's do it. This is, brace yourself.
I guess I'll start quickly with just some of the kind of outside context of how the movie sits. The movie was from the mid-90s, 1995, and this was what I call peak Demi Moore, really. She had a lot of really big movies, but she was just on the other side of the hill on the decline, because she would make this movie and then there was a couple of other stinkers after that, and then she had gone on probably a several year drought where she didn't even make any movies. And it was right after this time. Demi Moore had a lot of clout and helped to guide the direction this movie went in. So that gives you, and when we'll talk a little bit later about some of what her philosophies were on the movie and the historical context. Another aspect of the context of this movie is that it was based on the 1850 novel of Nathaniel Hawthorne of the same name, The Scarlet Letter. I'll give the movie some credit in the very broad strokes. It did follow the very, very skeleton outline of the movie. I mean, it had the same characters, they had the same names, happened in more or less the same place, the same time, and the narrative hit most of the key spots of the novel. But that's about it. They
have the same names, so
they
there
do
you
have
go.
This, yeah.
They did get
and after that, that's about it. Now, I'll give you a quick summary of the movie. This won't take too long because there's not a lot there. Basically, Hester Prynne, the movie starts off with her landing probably somewhere like Plymouth Rock or something like that. She gets off of the boat and she's wearing like all this fashionable garments, and you're in your mind that she's coming into the Puritans with their like belt buckle hats and all that. So she's made a real splash, like the first scene. And obviously the townfolk think that this beautiful, independent, outspoken, intelligent Hester Prynne, scandalous. I mean, they're Puritans, for crying out loud. All the good wives are jealous, and the good Puritan menfolk are judgmental but secretly want to be with her. You know, it's hitting all those classic themes right there that they wanted to hit in the 1990s film.
I was trying to think what movie are they ripping off that where I thought, well, it's not Footloose with Kevin Bacon where a guy comes to like a boring small town and shakes it up with the power of dance.
And there's a little bit of that.
So I'm trying to figure out like what is this trope that they're getting on that doesn't make any sense with this movie. But yeah, it's already inspiring.
Something of that effect, that she's coming to these people who are tight-laced. I mean, that was a really common, that would happen a lot of the movies in the 80s that she probably even starred in. Now,
yeah, it's true. It's like a Brat Pack thing, except in like 1650s Plymouth Colony.
Exactly. Now, Hester Prynne is sent to the Plymouth Colony, Massachusetts Bay Colony, to get her family set up. Her husband, Roger Prynne, has sent her ahead to buy a house and get their life set up. Now, for some reason, Hester finds a nice house out in the woods, not inside of the palisade where you might be protected when you're living in the wild frontier. But anyways, so, what's the first thing that she sees is she peeks through the brush and sees a guy going for a skinny dip. One thing leads to another, and Hester Prynne and her new beau know each other in the biblical sense, if you will. Puritan style. I mean, and that is one of the cheesiest scenes in all of movie history, where they're like romping around in this grain silo. Like you said, it was probably titillating for the 11-year-olds, the 11 to 15-year-old demographic.
Yeah, I'm from Iowa. There's nothing more sensual than rolling around in a grain bin. Yeah. For listeners, please, Steve pointed me to the Roger Ebert review, and he talks about how it's there's Tituba, her mute servant, is seeing a red bird fly around in her bathtub as, symbolizing sin.
Oh, it's brutal.
It almost makes you wonder, is there also going to be a love that dare not speak its name of an interracial lesbian romance in Plymouth Colony?
Yeah.
The movie doesn't go in that direction, but it wants to.
Yeah.
So read Robert Either. Like, he just says it's so awkward with the soft focus lighting sensuality in of getting it on Puritan style.
And just to add to that, this film does not age well. Like, it looks every bit of 1995. Like, just the worst of 1995. And it probably even looked like that in 1995. Just so, I don't know, we both said this, we don't know, we're not, film geeks as such on how they're filmed, but they must have had like a bad technology at that point where it just does not come across well. Now, to move forward a little bit, the person that Hester Prynne goes for this little romp with is the Reverend Mr. Arthur Dimmsdale, who's the really highly esteemed and beloved parson, pastor of the colony, of the Puritan colony. Now Hester winds up getting pregnant from this tryst, and obviously with no husband around, the people of the town draw the natural inference, and everybody's up in arms. Hester is publicly humiliated and has to wear an uppercase letter A on her jacket, which symbolizes her adultery or adulteriness, that she's obviously been in some sort of affair that she shouldn't have been in. She won't say who she was in the affair with, so there's obviously all the standard gossip going around. Now, while she's getting humiliated, in the back of the crowd, she sees that her husband, Roger Prynne, who she had heard at some point was supposed to be dead in a shipwreck, she sees him out in the crowd. And it winds up that Roger had been living with these Native Americans, and he went so nuts when he was there, the Native Americans kicked him out of their village.
So I guess that's complimentary to Native American tribal life in a nice sort of way. I don't know.
They wouldn't put up with a lunatic Robert Duvall in their village, and I don't blame them for that. To make a long story short, Hester has the baby while she's in prison. Roger Prynne, her husband, her actual husband, he really tries to put the screws on her to tell her who she had her affair with, and he's like full blown psycho at this point. She doesn't want to blow up Arthur Dimmsdale's life because, she loves him and stuff, I suppose, even though they haven't developed that. And she knows that Roger Prynne's is total crazy town, and that he's going to kill Dimmsdale and, just go psycho on everybody. During all this time, so we cut to the chase. Roger Prynne / he also goes by Roger Chillingworth. He takes on an alternate identity. He makes this plan to start a conflict between the Algonquin Indians who live outside of Boston and the Pilgrims. He goes and scalps some of the townspeople, the Puritans, to make it look like the Algonquins did it. The Puritans attack the Algonquins, and then the Algonquins in the ultimate scene come and attack the town with fire arrows, and I think they set a cart on fire and threw that through the town. Which that almost sounds like something.
Fire arrows, yes.
Yeah, sounds like something the Mongols would do. There's the big fight, and lots of people are dead. Roger Prynne feels so guilty, he kills himself. And all in all, in the end, the leaders of the colony don't want any of this mess getting back to England, basically back to corporate headquarters. So they're going to smooth it all over and pretend like none of this happened. And they're going to let Arthur Dimmsdale and Hester Prynne go run off to Carolina colony and live happily ever after. And that's that. Now, what's
perfect.
Wrong with that?
They did it all right.
It's all happily ever after. They get to live in sunny Carolina on the beach, and that's it. And so what might be the problem with that? There's a lot of problems. Scott, since this is your duty, what did you like about this movie?
Okay, so I'm really reaching here, so you're just going to have to bear with me on this. In terms of period appropriate dress, it was somewhat accurate. It wasn't as chintzy as, like a children's production of a First Thanksgiving. So I guess that's something there. Okay. Roger Chillingsworth, who goes off with the Algonquins, he goes and he scalps some people. Roger does. As I guess it presumes he learned it from the Algonquins or he developed on its own. This is not central at all to the film, and I doubt it was even its intention, but it inadvertently stumbles on the fact that different American Indian tribes had very different cultures. It's highly erroneous to lump them all together. Some were far more warlike than others.